Jalanku hampa. Tenang guys, don't panic.
Gak bisa tenang ini, Pak.
Udah live stream gak sih YouTube?
Udah.
Ya udah live stream.
Oke.
Katanya in the moment.
Buat member aku suruh masuk duluan ya. Member gold.
Ya.
Kalian diserbu chat kah?
Jangan dibaca lah, jangan dilihat chatnya lah.
Enggak.
Tadi HP gue udah kayak tring.
Ya, ya.
Ini kayaknya Telegram gue lagi rame nih, ribuan lagi.
Ya, tadi HP gue geter terus tau.
Anyway, ini sampai ada yang DM aku loh.
Apa? Di Telegram udah bilang kan?
Ini udah mulai OTW.
Kayak ini.
Ini member gold kah?
Ya, ini member gold.
Eh?
Oke, benar. Hi Felicia. Hi Felicia, how are you? Please wait a moment ya, we will start in a few minutes. Thank you so much. And you have privilege to enter the room first. Mantap.
Welcome Felicia.
Hai.
Oke, by the way, speakernya bakalan join jam berapa, Alia?
In a few minutes, katanya dia lagi ongoing join.
Alright. Ya, tapi tahu ya what's happening.
Iya, she know.
Alright.
Safe lah.
We will wait.
Setel musik dulu nggak sih? Ya ini. Anyway, musiknya jangan yang
Nanti
kena
kena
copyright.
monetize.
Ya,
Iya.
jangan yang kena copyright ya musiknya ya.
Kena lagi kayak waktu itu.
Cara tahu yang nggak kena copyright gimana deh?
Kamu buka YouTube, buka music no copyright.
Ini Nadira BTW member gold juga.
I think yes.
Wah, kok I think sih? Ada berapa orang emang yang OTW? Oke, let me check first. Streamingnya maksudnya, karena katanya udah tersambung ya.
Hi, hello, some members of GMT. Welcome. We will start in a few minutes. Please kindly to wait, yeah, everyone. Thank you so much to attend our webinar sessions today. Hope you will enjoy it.
Guys, can anyone please? Oh no. Wait.
Payzee.
It's okay, sure.
Oke. Ikrar bisa share sekarang ya.
Sorry, aku coba dulu. Oke. All right, all right.
Hora, did I send you the latest version of the PowerPoint? I'm happy to do share screen if it's okay with you, because I just added one more thing.
All right.
Okay, okay.
Is it okay? So I can just control it.
All right, Payzee.
Thank you.
Miss Payzee, I would like to ask you a couple questions before we start. So, would you prefer to get called as Miss Payzee or Miss Mahmod?
I'm happy with either one,
Okay, thank you.
whichever you prefer. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. Good evening and welcome to Global Millennial Model United Nations webinar. On today's webinar, we will be covering the topic of women's participation in ending gender-based violence with our spectacular speaker, Ms. Payzee Mahmod, women's rights campaigner and TED Talk speaker. Firstly, I would like to express my gratitude for everyone, as through your participation that this event was made possible, both for the committee and also the audience. To date, we have received an astounding amount of 100,000 registrants from all across the world, which is a spectacular milestone both for GMG and GMMUN. This webinar was held with the purpose of nurturing future change makers through insights covering global issues in ways that are accessible through this pandemic. So we thank you for enabling us to create such impacts. Now, before going further, allow me to introduce myself first. My name is Deborah Karen, and you can simply refer to me as MC Deb for the night, as I will be the master of ceremony and moderator for all of you in this webinar today. But before we begin, plenty of you have an abundance of questions regarding the organizers of this webinar, which is GMG and GMMUN. So we would like to give you a chance to get to know Global Millennial Group and the programs a little bit closer. Now let me introduce you to GMG. Global Millennial Group is a one self-developmental platform that strives for quality education and youth empowerment globally through various educational programs. Starting from 2020, our impact has reached 35 countries, 70,000 youth, 270 partners, and 15 programs. One of the biggest programs that we're currently holding is Global Millennial Model United Nations, which provides you two different sub-programs to participate in. The first is MUN Conference, and second is MUN School. In terms of consoles, we provided you with 6 different options for you to choose from: UNDP, UNICEF, UNHRC, ILO, UNEP, and of course, UN Women. And this is one of our beloved chairs that has partaken in our GMMUN conference before, Arya Dika, and this is what he has to say for our conference. Now, this is one of the testimony from our delegates, Givari Muhammad, and this is what he has to say after joining one of our MUN conference. Next to Global Millennial MUN Conference, GMG is holding 3 different programs which strives for quality educations and youth empowerments also. The first is Wonder Voice, which focuses on public speaking skills through competition at school. Second is Indonesia SDG Summit, which is the first and the biggest SDG Summit in Indonesia for youth. And last is Be Global, where you can be informed about how you can go abroad and prep up your professional skill set. GMG also provides you with membership plans starting from bronze, silver, and gold with every single one of the perks that are listed in your screen. Next to that, we are also currently opening up the first Global Millennial Group official merchandise store, which you can create your own and wrap GMG designs through your attires by checking out linktree/gmillennial.store. So should you be interested in any of the aforementioned programs or perhaps all, make sure to register on join.gmillennial.com and use reference code to get 100,000 rupiahs discount or even free MUN school. Well, okay, I think that wraps up our brief info session. Next, we will officially commence the event with an opening speech from the Director of Event Management, Ms. Haura Alia Amani. To Ms. Alia, the floor is yours.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Let me make sure. Am I audible right now? Okay, I guess I'm audible. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Haura Alia Amani, and I am the Director of Program Management for this webinar. And first of all, I would like to say thank you for everyone that joining us tonight. We have like 100,000 participants, and that's a lot of number. I cannot say anything but only thank you for you guys, because I know it's hard to joining us. I mean, yes, this is a certain topic that sometimes people want to ignore, but yes, I know we have 100,000 people that wanted to know more about gender. She agreed to join us as a speaker. So I really hope that she could bring a good impact for you guys. And I also wanted to say thank you to my team, Bila, Elfrey, Anthony, Jeffon, Ikrar. And also we have Mr. Audi as the CPO and Mr. Mufidi Fikri as the CEO of the Global Millennial Group. Since without every one of them, this webinar won't be happen tonight. Yes, we know gender-based violence is a bad thing. I mean, yes, it's a great bad thing, and I know that we should end this. This is not something that we should keep as a culture. So I know through this webinar, I hope you guys can gain more awareness, not only just women, even though the title said woman, but I wanted everyone, every single one of you, not only woman, but male, but trans, everyone can help to end the gender-based violence. Since we are all over the world, not only in Indonesia, but also in Europe, in Africa, and China, and in every country, we sometimes face this kind of crime. And yes, I hope we could bring a better peace world together. Thank you, and back to you, Deb.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Miss Alia, for the great speech. Now we will finally move on to the long-awaited sessions of the webinar. We will officially open, however, I would like to introduce a little bit about Miss Payzee Mahmod. So the webinar will be led and explained by Miss Payzee Mahmod, an Iranian and Kurdish women's rights campaigners who had mission to protect Middle Eastern and Afghan women and girls who are at risk of base violence, forced marriage, child marriage, female genital mutilations, and domestic violence, and of course, to promote their rights globally. However, before we meet Ms. Payzee Mahmod, I would like to kindly remind you all that in order for you to access your certificate later, you would have to fulfill the feedback form, which will be distributed later at the end of this webinar and will be closed at 12 a.m. sharp. So make sure to tune in until the end of the webinar. Well, without any further ado, let us greet our amazing speaker. Hello, Ms. Payzee Mahmod. How are you?
Okay, there we are. I'm unmuted. Good afternoon from London. However, good evening to all of you where you are. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm just going to share my screen with you. If you can please allow me to host for a moment to share the screen.
Absolutely, we will take care of it shortly.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry for my messy background. Okay, here we are. So thank you so much again for having me. I hope you are all well. And thank you for spending time with us this afternoon. You could be doing anything with your time, but you're here with us. So I do hope that you get some really great interaction from this today. Can you all see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
Brilliant, thank you. So my name is Payzee Mahmod, and I am a campaigner at ICRO. So we are a women's rights organization based in London who support Middle Eastern and North African women who are at risk of honor-based abuse, such as FGM, forced and child marriage, or honor-based abuse in other forms. I'm also a child marriage survivor myself and a TEDx speaker. For anybody who wants to keep up with the work that we're doing or who wants to follow our work, you can follow us on my social media at Payzee Malika or on all of our social media just at ICRO. So I'm going to move on to the next slide and tell you about the agenda for today. So I want to give you an insight into my own personal experiences and how I, as a young Kurdish woman, experienced gender-based violence through what I went through in my life. And then we'll elaborate a little more about what is gender-based violence, and also how we can individually and collectively as communities participate in ending gender-based violence. I want to also talk about what we can do if we are ever experiencing this ourselves, or we know somebody who is at risk and experiencing gender violence. And a very important point, I want us to discuss how the youth can participate in raising awareness on gender violence and how you can be part of the change going forward. So a little bit about myself. The left is a picture of me as a baby. I've changed a lot. So this is me when I was around 2.5, 3 years old. So my family originally are from Kurdistan, Iraq, and I was born in the midst of a great war back in '87, a war between Iran and Iraq, which my parents fled from. So I come from quite a big family, 5 sisters and also a brother. And from quite a young age, I would say I started to experience gender-based violence. So the very first point being that me and my sisters were exposed to FGM. So we all underwent the practice of FGM in Iran between the ages of 7 to 11. And the only explanation that I guess I was given as an adult for why I went through this was because this was something that had to be done and something that girls had to go through. And then my parents immigrated to the UK in 1998, where we settled down, went to school for the first time. However, my life took a very drastic change once again, experiencing gender-based violence. I was a child bride at the age of 16 in 2003. And at that point, also at 16, I became pregnant. Now, my sister, who was just 1.5 years older than me, also became a child bride and experienced a lot of abuse in her marriage. So she decided to leave her marriage after 2 years. And for doing that, when she left her marriage at the age of 18, her life was taken in a so-called honor killing. So for anybody who is not aware of what that is, it's any sort of act of violence that is perpetrated for this notion of honor or shaming and dishonoring your family. So as a result of that, several members of my family and other men from the community were sentenced to life imprisonment. And I myself began to leave my marriage at the age of 18, which was a very, very isolating experience. However, I managed to do that. Hopefully one day I'll delve a little bit more into how that even happened, because it felt merely impossible. So that brings me to being here with you today, many, many years later, and to tell you a little bit about the work I do on gender-based violence as a result of my own experiences. So because I experienced this myself, and I saw my sister and other women around me experiencing this, I started to campaign with ICRO to end child marriage in England and Wales. Because here in the UK, a child can be married at the age of 16 with parental consent, which very often opens up the doors for coercion, just like I experienced myself. So I'm very happy to say that we're at a very good point with this, and it has been confirmed by the government that the UK will change its laws of marriage from the age of 16 with parental consent to 18 with no exceptions, which is absolutely great. Now, another form of gender-based violence is virginity testing and hymenoplasty, which are very, very connected. Again, these are things that I saw in my community and I heard about growing up, and sadly also experienced in my child marriage, this form of virginity testing. And so we are working, campaigning and leading on the campaign to ban hymenoplasty and virginity testing at ICRO. We are working with an MP in the UK to ensure that this is done, and we hope to see that happen very, very soon. So as well as campaigning on these issues, I also campaign on honor-based abuse, which includes FGM, child marriage and forced marriage. And I'm extremely passionate about women's rights, and I feel it's my true calling. Previous to where I am now, I used to work in fashion. However, the moment I started campaigning, it just felt like this is what I was supposed to do. And I strongly feel like my experiences have led me here today. And so I hope all of you listening today will be moved to want to participate in ending gender-based violence and learn a little bit more about what it means and what it looks like and how we can all contribute. So let's get into what is gender-based violence. Now, I think the clue is in the name, but if we break it down a little bit more, we understand that this refers to any harmful act. So whether that's verbal, that's physical, or that's sexual, any act that is directed at an individual because of their gender. So essentially, it's entirely rooted in gender inequality, and it's the abuse of power and harmful norms. So we're talking about toxic masculinity and sexism. Now, it's really important that we recognize gender-based violence is a serious violation of human rights, and it's something that nobody should experience, regardless of your gender. It is something that is a violation. So to give you a little bit of an estimate, 1 in 3 women will experience either physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. And that's a huge, huge number. If you look at it, right now I can see 3 of us on the screen. That means that at some point in our lifetime, one of us will have experienced this form of gender-based violence. And it is something that is preventable. It's not something that just happens. This is something that is absolutely preventable. And gender-based violence can happen anytime, anywhere in the world. However, there are times where the crisis can rise. For example, at the time that we're going through right now, which is the COVID era, we have seen gender-based violence and all forms of abuse rise heavily all over the world because of the crisis that we find ourselves in. So what does it include? As I said, there are so many forms of gender violence, and that can include verbal, that can be sexual assault, that can be intimate partner, whether that's a heterosexual couple or a same-sex couple. And it can also be from either strangers or family members. It can be in various forms such as stalking, harassment. Now, the way that we have to address this, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we can do to address gender-based violence, but one way to address this is to look at what is encouraging violence as part of masculinity. And it's this idea that being a woman is weak. And of course, we all know this is entirely incorrect, but these harmful notions is what drives gender-based violence. And although we often very much hear about gender-based violence as a predominantly experienced by women and children and perpetrated by men, it's important that we acknowledge men can also be can also be victims of this crime, and they are not always the perpetrator. So it's important to note that we're not saying all men are violent here. And we're not saying that women cannot be perpetrators of violence. So when we talk about this picture, although the figures almost always tell us about women experiencing this, it's important that we don't exclude anybody else. So where does this happen? When we say gender-based violence, we are not talking about this happening in any particular country or any particular region of the world. Although we acknowledge that there are different factors that can make it worse and different factors that can contribute to it happening, we have to accept that it doesn't matter where you are in the world, gender-based violence can occur. And it happens in all classes, in all cultures, all religions, genders, and also ages. it does not discriminate. So if we look at how it comes up in the world of work, in workplaces a little bit, there are different forms. So you have the emotional and the psychological abuse that people can experience. So we're talking about insults and belittling and intimidation and humiliation. So for example, somebody at work destroying your things or threatening to harm you or to take something away from you. And there are also controlling behaviors such as monitoring, so almost like stalking your behaviors, but in a workplace, and restricting you to your financial resources, such as medical care or employment, getting a raise in your job or moving onwards. And then there are acts of violence, so such as physical hitting or kicking or actually beating. And finally, we have sexual violence, which can include forms of sexual coercion, so where there is no consent involved, or where someone is having remarks made at them regarding their sexuality maybe, or having sexual gestures made at them. So again, looking at where gender-based violence happens quite closely, it's important that we acknowledge in the different ways that it can happen and how it can trickle down. So if we look at society, which forms our communities and then forms relationships that we have, and then finally the individual person themselves. And if we look at this a little bit closer, we think about in an individual level, we're talking about personal security, people's personal attitudes towards what they believe is right with regards to genders. And this will determine whether somebody will become a victim or a survivor or a perpetrator of violence. Now, the second level being relationships. If you think about that, two individuals, that's two different mindsets coming together, and that can also be within families. Now, at this level, there are already power inequalities amongst individuals. So that's whether at workplaces or within partners and families. And then you have a community dynamics where you have people who are influenced by one another, where you have different structures. So within communities, you have other people who may be, for whatever reason, whether it's wealth or respect, they may be above others than their other peer groups. And that also has an impact. And then if we look at society as a whole, we're including the cultural and the social norms that we all learn about gender roles. And that's all of our attitudes towards women, towards men, and towards children. And this is all framed by legal works of government, so the laws that we have and how violence is tackled. Now, when we look at this picture, it's quite clear to see how these things impact one another and how interventions to prevent at different points can be very, very impactful. And it tells us that we should be targeting change at every single level. And one without the other is merely impossible to achieve. So we're always looking at how do we change things at community level, at individual level, at society level, and also at relationship levels in order to make a real impactful change. So since we're talking a lot about youth engagement and also what youth can do, it's important that we address what is happening in schools and places of education. So the very first thing, every child at school or in education deserves to be safe. Now, unfortunately and sadly, gender-based violence is a significant barrier for children to the right of education. And that can be in young adults too. Now, it doesn't just include peer-to-peer gender-based abuse, but we're also talking about teacher-perpetrated abuse. For example, corporal punishment or sexual coercion. And it can also include bullying or discrimination. Schools play quite a critical role in ensuring that young people are aware of what gender-based violence looks like and intervening and talking about the preventions and the responses that we have to gender-based violence. Just a fact which I read and I wanted to share with you It's estimated that 246 million children have experienced school-related violence every year. Now, that definitely is underlined in the equal gender norms and the power relations that happens within schools and environments where gender norms are harmful and where we follow the harmful notions of boys equal this or girls equal this. So school is a really, really important key driver in ensuring that young people learn about gender-based violence and learn how to tackle this. So I wanted to share this image with you just to show you a little bit more about gender-based violence and what it looks like. So we're talking here about at school. So you have physical, psychological, and also sexual. And within that, there are different forms that one can experience either at separate times or all at the same time. And it's important to think about all these things as connected that young people experience. And we see them as gender-based violence and tackle them. So what may seem just like bullying can be either physical, sexual, or psychological harm for somebody under the radar of gender-based violence. So again, just some figures here I want you to look at. We won't stay on this image for too long, but as soon as you look at these figures, I think they jump out really, really quickly. If we just look at the European Union, since the age of 15, 1 in 2 women have experienced sexual harassment. 1 in 5 have experienced stalking. 1 in 20 have been raped. And 1 in 3 women have experienced physical and or sexual abuse. And these figures are quite staggering and tell us that this is really an emergency, and we're talking about figures that are very, very shocking. And I'm sure for anybody seeing this on the screen, it really paints a picture of how real this issue is and just how common people are experiencing this and why we need to all be part of the change that needs to happen. So looking at gender-based violence as a global issue, when you look at the figures, I mentioned earlier, women are disproportionately affected. And again, I stress this note that we're not saying that men are not impacted. Men are also impacted by this, but women are often victims and survivors of gender-based violence. And truly, the figures globally, not in one nation more than the other, but the figures globally are extremely, extremely staggering, and they do tell us that we're facing a real life emergency here, and one that cannot be ignored. So a little bit more about men and how men can experience gender-based violence. So as I said in the beginning, the very important thing to remember with gender-based violence is that this is a violation of your human rights. And so of course, we consider all genders as humans. So when we think about that, reports actually show that although men can be the main perpetrators, we shouldn't be blind to the fact that they can be victims. And what keeps men silent in these issues is, again, this idea of society's toxic masculinity, this harmful norm that has been going on over time. And it's a part of gender inequality where men are seen as strong or men are seen as weak for speaking out. But if we achieve gender inequality, what that looks like is men, women, children, and everyone being listened to, and communities making space for everyone without any discrimination. Without that acknowledgement, we are not able to achieve gender equality. And the way we think about going forward to achieve that, it means leaving no one behind. So if there's anybody left behind, there's no way we can achieve that. So it's really, really important to keep that in mind. Okay, so on this slide, let's talk about what we can do, because I'm sure talking about these issues, it always makes us think, okay, so how can I be part of this solution? How can I do something? Whether that's, supporting somebody or speaking about this, there are things that we can all do to be part of this change. And the first thing we must do is to stand against this and to hold people responsible. Because if we witness this as bystanders, we are contributing to what is happening. We have to, of course, take part in being part of the solution in an active way, but always a safe way. So, what can you do if you feel as though there is someone around you who may not be safe and who may be experiencing gender-based violence? The first thing you should do is safely raise that issue and remind that person that abuse is never their fault. So whichever form they are experiencing gender-based violence abuse in, always remind them that this person has done nothing to deserve what they are experiencing. And support the people that you are talking them, allow them to make their own decisions and give them a safe space to discuss their feelings and talk about how they want to proceed and what type of support they need. Sometimes when people are experiencing gender-based violence, it can be quite critical, and we can be talking about a form of abuse that can escalate very quickly, sadly, sometimes in the form of fatality. So people can lose their lives as a result of gender-based violence. So responding quickly is essential, but of course, safely. And learning about what help is available. So doing some research about which organizations can support your friend or your family member or your colleague or somebody at school with you. So learn about what help is available around you and what you can access. And as youth, as the next generation, I want to give you a message that you can shape the future, and there is so much in your hands. There is so much you can do to change things. Just by having conversations and raising awareness and talking openly about these issues, you will help progress these conversations. Because in many places, these type of conversations are taboo and they are difficult to open up, and they can seem very secretive and shameful, and practicing them in this way can only drive these issues under. It means that we are acknowledging the problem is there, but we want to just push it underground and we don't want to address it. But just holding space for open communication, safe communication about this, you can start to change things that's in your peer groups, and then that just widens out like we were discussing before. And it's important you remember that violence is a choice. It's preventable. It's not something that just happens. There is no excuse for it. So by talking about how we can change this and how it can be prevented, we can truly lead towards a future where gender equality can be achieved and gender-based violence is no longer something that so many people experience. And just getting the message out. So today you've taken the time out to be with us here and to speak about this and to learn about this. If you just tell one person who is a friend on social media or a friend at school or at work, just letting them know that you've attended something like this and you've learned about this helps them learn, who then passes that information to the next person. Word of mouth is a very, very powerful tool that we can use to have these conversations. So that was more of an individual level, but at more of a global level, there's things that can be done. There's things that we have to strive for to make sure that those who are experiencing gender-based violence have the support they need. And there are several things that can be done at an organization level or a government level. So first things first being that survivors who are at risk of violence have access to comprehensive support. We're talking about intersectional support here. So psychological support, health and housing support, legal support. And for anybody who may have want to access a specific support. So for example, if you have someone who's experiencing gender-based violence and they're from an LGBTQ community, they will want to access that type of support and to have somebody who listens to them and understands them and gives them that safe support, but is also a type of support that is catered to them. Because it's important that we all feel, whether it's our sexuality or our disability or our religion, we all have a safe space to turn to. And so support cannot look like one type of support for everyone. Because if I'm from a Christian background and I approach for example, a organization who may not be so familiar with my beliefs or may not be able to support me, then I will not be able to perhaps open up and ask for the support I need. So it's really important that we all feel safe in approaching support systems. Promoting the economical, social and political empowerment of women and girls. So here we're talking about the experience that women and girls have is crucial to preparing the solutions to this issue. They hold such important expertise and therefore they should be given space in high level discussion making. So whether that's in government or whether that's in organizational support frameworks, women and girls should have that space to offer their experiences so that they can shape the framework of the support for other survivors. Okay, so supporting and expanding policies. Again, if we look at gender equality in social norms, these are often very, very harmful. And this is the root to what is causing gender inequality, which as a result causes gender-based violence. We have to engage everybody in these conversations. And I think one particular critical group is men and boys, and community leaders and also community members who may have a challenging views and maybe patriarchal views on certain beliefs, such as FGM. It's about offering everybody that space to a safe conversation and learning about why these issues are harmful. And finally, increasing support and funding and space for organizations. So there's often much talk around organizations who are not getting the funding from government, and they struggle to meet the demands of those who need the support. So it's about having that support from government so that we can offer the support to survivors and to victims who are experiencing gender-based violence. And again, as I was saying, also youth-led and specialist services. So for maybe LGBTQI communities or for non-binary persons, it's important that these organizations are able to offer that specific support, whether it's emotional support, advocacy, or any type of help. And then actually that was my final point, sorry. I wanted to elaborate making public resources available. So again, when we're talking about prevention, there's often a lack of public awareness around this. So campaigns, social media, acknowledgement around these issues, and open conversations around gender-based violence and how we can play a role. So I will leave you with this, and I have underlined the word I, because I want you to ask yourself, how can I help end gender-based violence? And there's a few things I've put here because I think they're very important. As somebody who has experienced gender-based violence, I think these are the things that we need to start implementing in our day-to-day lives when we're coming across survivors or anybody who may need support. You need to listen and believe survivors. There are many harmful and toxic notions of questioning when somebody has said they have experienced abuse, but we need to simply believe those who say, I have been a victim of abuse. We need to teach the next generation and also learn from them, because they truly do shape our future. So that's so many of you here today. You truly have such a big role to play in these issues. Consent is a huge deal and very important when we're talking about gender-based violence, especially in regards to sexual violence. So understanding and practicing consent within your peer groups and your communities. Learning about the signs of abuse and how you can help. So it may be that somebody around you is experiencing this, but how do you realize that they're experiencing it without them saying it and without them raising the alarm? So learn about that, do a little bit of research of how you can approach this conversation. And that can happen by just starting a conversation, telling somebody about the event you attended, telling someone about something you read. Again, we come back to sexual violence because it is something very prevalent in our societies, but standing up against rape culture. So when you may hear comments or discriminatory opinions, it's standing up and actually saying, taking a stand and correcting those with harmful views towards rape culture. Supporting women's organization. This is something that you can do through just merely social media or sharing our work or donating if this is something you're able to do. And I think finally, this is something we can all do starting right now, is holding each other accountable. So making sure that our friends, our peers, and all those around us are aware of these issues and also actively play a role in ending gender-based violence. So I believe that takes me to the end of my PowerPoint. Thank you so much for listening, and ask away if you have any questions. I'm here to listen and answer. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Payzee Mahmod, for such an elaborative and a beautiful articulations of information. So to give a recapitulations, basically we need to participate, because we're basically the key to the change, and youth are the change makers for gender-based violence and the stoppage of child marriage. Okay, so I'm sure that many of you guys in the Zoom room and also in the YouTube chat, you have more questions for Ms. Mahmod. So we will move on to the session that you have been waiting for, which is the question and answer session. Should you have any questions for Ms. Mahmod, you can write it down on the Zoom comment sections, or you can use the raise hand feature and then unmute yourself after I call your name. Okay, so let's see those hands, people. Okay, so we have quite a few already. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I'm going to call upon Kyla Azahra. Kyla Azahra, you're there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so you may
Okay.
ask Ms. Mahmod your question.
Okay, thank you for giving me a chance to ask. My question is, how do we convince our society, especially our like our closest society, that is our family, that we have to end this global violence, and also that you mentioned before is toxic masculinity. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question. So I would say we have to look at what we can do. I can personally say I have experienced a lot of barriers when trying to have these conversations with family members, and it's something that it's still a work in progress. But I think start small with small steps at a time. Sometimes for a lot of people, when you start these conversations, they can be very scary because they've never had these conversations. And so they close off very quickly, and you find that you can't open that conversation with them and they just shut you out. But I say take small steps and give people that time to take in the information, because when we talk about the harms, when we think about the number of women, children, of men experiencing abuse, it really does hit you, and it makes you think about wanting to make sure that we are part of the change. So I think giving people the information just slowly and allowing them to take that in, I think we can build the change. I feel very hopeful that change is possible, but I think we can all agree it can be so slow. And sometimes that's a frustration because you want to see something change, but it takes so long for change to happen. And I think with small steps at a time, we can all have these conversations in our families. And believe me when I say, I know it's very difficult sometimes because you feel like you are up against a wall and it's impossible to get through. But take small steps, and I truly hope that it can happen.
Okay, thank you so much, Mrs. Payzee Mahmod, for your answer. This has really helped me because I think our little step to end this toxic masculinity is from our closest society, is our family. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yes, you're so right. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Kala Zara, for the answer. As for the question and answer session, so I will call upon next Julia Anissa. Julia Anissa, are you there? Julia Anissa, are you there? Okay, we're going to move on to the next one then. Prasidya Sekar Maulidina. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so you may ask Ms. Payzee Mahmod your question.
Okay, for the first, thank you for giving me a chance to ask. But before, I want to apologize to Ms. Payzee Mahmod if my English is not really good. I'm using Google Translate right now.
It's good.
My question is, how can we succeed in convincing the victim to speak up about what she has gone through? Because as we know, victims are more likely to keep their mouths shut about what they are going through. What is the right way to deal with that? That's my question.
Thank you so much for your question. Your English is perfect. I understood everything you said. I would say, so there's two things. Victims very often feel scared and worried about speaking up because a lot of people are fearful that they will not be believed, because in our society there's a very harmful notion of questioning survivors and victims who speak up, and people saying we don't believe them and questioning their truth. So society's view on this really has to change, and we have to believe everyone who says that they've experienced abuse. So I think something that you can do is, if somebody explains to you or opens up to you about their abuse, the first thing is to actually acknowledge that you believe them, because that in itself is so powerful. And it's probably something that so many victims and survivors want to hear, because it just makes them feel as though this was not their fault and that they are believed, and for speaking up, they're not shunned or ashamed. And I think to encourage people to speak up, the best way, and I think the most practical way to do this, is to offer someone a safe space. When people feel like they can trust others and when they feel like they have a safe space, people will open up. And it's about letting them know that you are there for them and that you will never make any decision without their consent and without them being absolutely happy. So allowing them to make choices, but just giving them that safe space and room to express themselves and to talk about their experiences without any judgment. I think that's something that a lot of people do fear. I will be honest, I only started campaigning a couple of years ago, but all of my experiences happened about 17 years ago. And it took me a very long time to be able to say, this happened to me, or that I experienced this, because I always felt maybe people won't believe me, or maybe people won't understand what I've gone through. So it's about all of us being educated on these issues and trying to really steer away from any harmful societal assumptions that we may have along our life have picked up, the harmful norms that we don't believe her, or she might be lying. All these things that society really pushes onto victims. So I would say, just give the safe space and let someone know that you are there for them. That sometimes is all it takes for someone to open up to you.
Okay, thank you very much for the answer, Ms. Payzee Mahmod. And thank you for the question. I would like to call upon one more from the Zoom room. Gala Zavira. Gala Zavira, are you there? Hello, Gala. Okay, so move on to Fadil Al-Harits. Fadil Al-Harits, are you there?
Hello.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the opportunity. So my question is how to convince people that violence is a choice to the one who did that, because my sister experienced a lot about the harassment, and people around her always said that it happened because your lifestyle, it happened because your outfit. And how to convince people that violence is really, really a choice to the one who did that. Thank you so much.
This is such a good question. Thank you so much for your question. So again, society has this way of blaming people for their experiences. So whether it's a girl walking down the street and wearing what she wants to wear, and people seeing that as the reason and not addressing the person who is responsible for their actions. I think the way that we can start to move away from victim blaming is by holding people accountable for their actions. So if we see, for example, men in the street harassing women or catcalling, it's about not being a bystander and holding that other person accountable for what they're doing. Because this again contributes to why so many women don't speak up, because they are scared that they will be blamed for the experiences that they had, the abuse that they experienced. So it's about involving men and asking them to take responsibility for their actions. Somebody's choice of clothing or somebody's choice of lifestyle cannot be the reason that you choose to be violent to them. That person has made the choice to be violent. And very often it can be that the person, the perpetrator, who is being violent towards someone else, they may have issues that they need to address themselves, and they need to ask themselves, why am I behaving like this to this person? Why, instead of talking to them or explaining, am I being physically violent to them? So I think it's, I know it's really difficult to do because, again, society really blames victims for their experiences, and very often women, whether it's street harassment or sexual harassment or intimate violence, women can often be blamed for it. But I think we can, it's something we have to constantly do, is remind others that there is never a justification to why you have been violent towards someone. It can sound easier said than done, but it's about holding people responsible. So if, for example, your sister's partner has been violent to her, it's the one thing you can do is reassure your sister that she has done nothing to experience this abuse, and no action warrants somebody being physically violent to you, and helping her be empowered in that the man who has been violent to her is responsible, and there is no responsibility she has on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Payzee Mahmod, for the answer. And thank you, Fadil, for the questions. We would like to go back to Gaia. Gaia, are you there? Gaia did ask a question. Apparently, turns out she cannot unmute herself on time, so I kind of passed on her. Apologize for that. Gaia, are you there? Okay, because Gaia is seemingly is not emerging anytime soon. Hello, Gaia, are you there?
Hello.
Hello. Okay, I cannot find you on the participants list. I'm so sorry.
Okay. I would like to ask a question, like, as we know, in every country we have different religion, we have different culture, that sometimes there's assumption that women should be at home, women should wear like this, women should be like this, and not like the other men that are can do everything. So that is from our society, and we cannot do anything about that. So I would like to ask suggestion from you, Mrs. So maybe what can I do to not change people assumption, because it's different, it's so hard to do it. Maybe to just tell them that.
I think this one it's really hard, isn't it? I completely understand, especially because the way societies and communities are, there's so much influence that people have over each other. But I think one of the things that was addressed in the first question is starting with the people close to you. So whether it's your friends and your families, and trying to have those conversations slowly and slowly, because in communities where gender roles, so women should do this and men should do this, in those communities, this has been practiced for so long. And so what we're trying to do, we're trying to break things from hundreds and hundreds of years of tradition. And that can often take so much time. So it's possible, it's absolutely possible, because we have seen change with, for example, FGM and other issues. We do see the change, but it's about starting in your small environment and hoping that it will trickle up, because it all starts with a conversation. In many communities where child marriage happens or FGM happens, over time and over generations, it feels very slow because it takes so long. But over time, the conversations start to trickle up, and from government level, they start to trickle down. So it's about all of us working together, and wherever you have the space. So for example, in your school or in your place of education, if you are if you have the space to just open that conversation and ask, is it possible that we can have a morning seminar on this? Or is it possible that we can openly discuss this? For example, in your workplace, where you may be with younger adults, to ask if you can have a morning, an hour and a half, where you can talk about gender roles and you can talk about gender violence. Because I think very often talking about the figures and the harms is what hits people. So if you have that space to open up the conversations in your school, in your workplace, try to take advantage of that and to open those conversations and get men involved, and get people to talk to you about what they think and exchange views. And sometimes, honestly, all it takes is a conversation for people to start to think about these issues.
Thank you very much, Miss.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Payzee Mahmod, once again for the answer, and also Gaia for the question. We would like to move on from one of the questions that we have received from the YouTube comment section, as we are also live streaming on YouTube. And I would like to read it out loud for you. Okay. Hi, I am Aurelia Saraswati, and I would like to ask one thing I'm very curious about. From what I have known, gender equality is still a merely strange topic in some countries, especially those with high patriarchal culture, and actions in sounding out about gender equality are not taken seriously yet. Condoning of the actions on gender-based violence are yet still normalized as well. What is the most crucial yet challenging thing to so that the actions of gender-based violence can be tackled? Yeah, there you go, the question, Ms. Payzee.
A very good question again. Again, 100% agree that it is so much more difficult in some places in the world than other places. But there's a few things we can do. We can ensure that we raise children around us to unbreak the cycle. So learning from a young age, teaching boys how to treat each other and how to treat girls and women, how to show respect, and really teaching them about what it means to be accountable for your actions. And I think, again, empowering girls from a really young age that this is not okay, that you should never ever have to experience this. Because I think for a lot of perhaps I will say even before my generation, these are things that I was never told growing up. I wasn't told about gender violence. I wasn't told about how to protect myself and how to make sure that that I don't experience this, and how to recognize the signs. I was never told about these things. So I think if we speak to young people about this from a very young age, you know, as young as 5, 6, even before, we empower them in knowing what is wrong and right. And again, in places in the world where it's really difficult, I think it's again starting in community level conversations. Sometimes women have these conversations on their own, and then that one person might speak to a man about it, or speak to you know, their husband or their father or their brother about it. So it's trying to have the conversation in a way to ensure that everyone is included. Because I think one thing you can do is by going in very, very hard with these conversations and trying to be too impactful, you can lose people. And along the way, people can feel excluded and attacked. And you don't want to do that. We don't want to attack anyone. We want to bring everyone on this change. We want men, children, women, everybody who wants to end this solution. So we need to try to involve everyone and take one step at a time. But to me, the greatest tool that we all have, that is such a important tool, is the power of conversation. With just a conversation, we can change things slowly but surely.
Thank you very much, Ms. Payzee Mahmod. That was a beautiful articulations on the answer. So out of plenty of the questions that we have received in the Zoom room, I would like to bring one that is most striking to me. I hope you don't mind. This one is from Diva Kairunisa Salsabila. Hi, I am Diva. I have been sexually abused by my own dad, and I would like to ask, do you think abusers can change and learn to stop gender violation? There you go, Ms. Mahmod.
Thank you for the question. The first thing I will say to you is thank you for sharing that with us, and I hope that you feel safe in doing that. I'm sorry you experienced that. In regards to whether I believe abusers can change, I personally strongly believe in perpetrator programs, and I believe that we must allow the room to ensure people understand their mistakes, take responsibility for their mistakes, and to learn from them. I do also believe that it's entirely a personal choice if you choose to, for example, have a relationship with your father after experiencing this. But I think that you must, the one way to hold people accountable is to let them own their responsibility of their actions. And one way to do that is to put them through, I think, perpetrator programs, so that these people can learn their ways, the ways of their habits, and truly change. I would like to say I believe in change. Sometimes that is truly tested, because when you hear about the figures and the amount of people experiencing gender-based violence, it can feel as though the same people are repeating this to the several victims. But I believe I'm a hopeful person who would like to believe in change. And I hope that anybody who has perpetrated any violence on anybody understands that it's wrong, and that they should never, ever take such action, and they should take responsibility for their actions.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope that will be very, very beneficial and helpful and comforting for the one that shared the questions. And thank you, Ms. Mahmod, for the answer. So I would like to give one more chance for our participants here in the Zoom room to ask a question. I would like to call upon Mehdi Kartini. Mehdi Kartini, are you there? Okay.
I'm there.
Okay, you may ask the questions now.
Okay, hello, my name is Mehdi Kartini. Sorry if my pronunciation is not good. So I have a question for you. What's your reason and your motivation to survive from your bad incident of your all times? Thank you.
Oh, I love this question. That's a really good one to end. Thank you for this question. What's my reason and motivation? I truly believe that we can all live in a better world. And I truly believe that we can all be so much happier if violence, all forms of violence, gender violence, honor-based abuse, sexual violence, if all of these forms can be eradicated. And I believe that this is holding back so many people. There are so many futures that are hindered and that are, so many lives are taken by abuse. So for me, what really inspires me is to see a better future for the next generation, for my generation, and to see a better world, because I think together we can achieve so much. I see incredible work being done, and I see so many people invested in these conversations. I mean, all of us being here together today, that tells me all of us want to see a change and all of us want to be part of the change. So this is what drives me, is talking to people like yourself and to have these conversations, knowing that we want to see this change. We want a better world. We want to be safe, and we want a world where nobody's rights are taken from them, and we all are truly able to be safe, to be happy, and to live our lives with the choices we want to make. And I think we all deserve that. So that's what drives me.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Nady, for the question, and also Ms.
Thank
Mahmod
you.
for the answer.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm sure that many of you guys have more questions for Ms. Mahmod. Sadly, due to the time constraints, we must end the question and answer session right now. Maybe you guys can participate in the next webinar and start more insights and also questions there. Okay, however, now we will present the certificate for Ms. Mahmod as a token of appreciation and honor from us, GMMUN, to Ms. Payzee. Okay, so we will take a documentation right now. Ms. Payzee, I will begin the countdown. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Okay, one more. 3, 2, 1. Beautiful. Thank you very much, Ms. Payzee Mahmod, once again for your valuable time and knowledge. And to capture today's beautiful moment, I think we should have a photo session together. So to all participants, please turn on your cameras. Those of you who are in Zoom room, please open up your camera so we can see your beautiful smiles and faces. Okay, we're still waiting for a lot of people to turn on their cameras. Okay, I believe that is all. We will take 5 photo sessions, you guys. So I will begin the countdown from now. Bear in mind that you guys cannot be certain on which page you will pop up. So just keep that smile up and running. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Okay, the second one. 1, 2, 3. Okay, the third one. 1, 2, 3. The fourth one, almost there, guys. Come on, keep it up. 1, 2, 3. Okay, finally, the last one. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, beautiful. Thank you. Well, now we are at the end of this webinar. I want to thank our magnificent speaker, Ms. Payzee Mahmod, for giving an outstanding and thought-provoking discussion on gender-based violence. And I would like to thank every single one of the participants today in the Zoom room who have stayed through the webinar from the beginning up until this minute. We can only hope that tonight has brought you such insights that are beneficial to you as part of the change makers and empowering youth to speak up and eradicating child marriage and gender-based violence. Also, do not forget to fill the feedback form if you haven't, because if you would like to see some more of such events like this in near future, we need your feedbacks. And on behalf of the team, we would like to apologize should there be any inconvenience in today's webinar. See you at the next one, everyone, and thank you.
Thank you, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you, everyone. Don't forget to fill in the feedback form, okay?